call it God. I don't mind. I'm just saying when it comes to the original African archetype of conception, I want to use the words and the terms that they use because we genetically have an affinity with the tones. So when we speak it in the tones that our ancestors demonstrated when they spoke, perhaps it may wake something up in us that's dormant to reestablish these same ideals. So I choose to say nature, but ultimately, whether we call it God or not, it's okay, because that could be your objective focus, because man tends to want to make things have eyes, nose, and lips just like itself. So we'll find that the angels are in heaven with white robes, and God has a throne, so he must have buttocks because he sits on it. And then if there's white robes, then I have to wonder if there's sewing machines. And if there's sewing machines, are black people enslaved there? Are they picking cotton in heaven? I don't know, because if there's white robes, then there's cotton. And if the devil was able to wage war, Revelation chapter 12, verse 7, and be kicked out of heaven and cast where? To earth. If he can take a third of the stars or a third of God's congregation with him in heaven, then, I mean, he's a very convincing dude. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And if he can come down to heaven and beguile Eve, I'm not confused about that. This is only a man or an entity that existed in God's kingdom that was able to convert 1/3 of God's congregation, who is man, that just was created, to not be confused or deceived by someone with so much experience and so much wisdom. So, I mean, that's the narrative there. That ain't me talking. That's the narrative there. And if Job can walk around, if we could go in the book of Job and we could see the devil walking to and fro, and God asks him in Job 7:1-8, and where art thou come from, Satan? And he says, from walking to and fro in the earth, not on the earth, to and fro in the earth. If he can do that, and tell God, he just comes into his meeting with the angels, and God said, where you been this whole time, walking to and fro in the earth? Well, hold on, didn't in Genesis 3:14 he got put on his belly? But now we in the book of Job, and he walking around to and fro in the earth. And you know what God said? Let's have a bet. Try my servant Job. And guess what? Job gets balls on his skin and famine, and he loses his family because of a bet that God got to have with the devil. But this is what we teach our children. It's okay. And then we can sing Rockabye Baby on the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle rock. Who's going to put their baby on top of a tree and wait for the wind to blow to see the cradle to rock, and possibly the child dies? Yeah. And then we're going to also sing Old MacDonald Had a Farm. E-I-E-I-O, right? But then we got to look. A, B, C, D, E, fifth letter. I, Roman numerals, 6. So we got E-I, 6, E-I. 6 and O is the 15th letter in the English alphabet. And 1 + 5 is 6. So Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, 666. Maybe we tripping. You know what I'm saying? So I don't even talk to people much because I don't want them to think that I'm crazy. But this can't be by accident.
So, you're married?
Yeah.
But you're married to more than one person?
This is correct.
So you have a polygamous relationship?
Dr. Umar Johnson recently was on 105.1 FM out of New York, The Breakfast Club, with DJ Envy, Angela Yee, and Charlamagne the God. During the interview, Johnson talked about a whole range of issues. It led to him being the talk of Black Twitter last week, and a lot of people were questioning his educational credentials.
Now, people ask me, what can we expect from a Donald Trump White House for Black America? And the answer is real simple. You can expect exactly what you got from a Obama White House. Absolutely nothing. Black people know they're not American, but they will fight like hell to protect that identity because they don't want to be identified with who they really are, and that's being African. As long as you have a skill, you can always feed your family. But if all you got is college degrees, you might end up in the unemployment line. I'm a psychologist. Ain't too many black people running around looking for a psychologist to reveal all the skeletons in their closet.
All right, folks, joining us right now, Dr. Umar Johnson. Welcome back to the show. First and foremost, it was amazing looking at his whole reaction. I mean, I'm sitting here, again, people asking all kind of questions, things are blowing up. And so many people jumped on saying he's not a real doctor, okay? Where did you graduate from and you got your PhD?
My undergraduate education was from Millersville University. 3 degrees, political science, psychology, master's in school psychology. Subsequent to that, Pennsylvania certification as a school psychologist, which I've been for almost 20 years. After that, I got my educational leadership master's degree and principal certificate from Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And I earned my doctorate degree from the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, American Psychological Association approved program, one of the top psychology training programs on the East Coast. 6 degrees in all, and anyone can lift up a telephone and call and verify those degrees.
So when you see folks who question your degrees, your response?
It's because my narrative is a whole lot different from the average mainstream black scholar. I don't parrot the narrative that the American social order wants black scholars to parrot. I tell the truth. I don't scratch unless I itch, and I don't dance unless I like the music. And because they're not used to having someone with a traditional education posit non-traditional views, people will automatically start to question his credentials. How did he get this far believing what he believes in? Well, you have to play the spook who sat by the door. When I got accepted into those 3 universities, they didn't know what I believed in. They didn't know what I stood for. But as time went on, it revealed itself. But I'm unapologetically African, so I'm not really concerned with what people think about me personally. I have a job to do, and that is to awaken the sleeping consciousness of African people, not just in America, but all across the world.
One of the things that you said during the interview, you said that Mandarin was one of the official languages in South Africa.
Yes, sir.
And others said you were dead wrong.
Yes, because I didn't clarify that I was speaking of it being an official language in the public school system of South Africa. So I should have clarified that Mandarin is an official language in the Republic of South Africa's school system. It's not an official language in the country, it's an official language in the school system. And I was speaking of schools, but I didn't clarify that, so that's my responsibility.
Also, during that particular interview, you talked about a variety of issues that also got people talking. One of them dealt with your views on interracial marriage.
Yes, sir.
And so, so explain that for folks who did not hear it.
Certainly. Simply put, any black man who is with a woman who's not an African herself is going to have a difficult time getting respect from me. I believe black men need to be with black women. The black family is under attack. Only 1 out of every 4 black women gets married. The black woman is last likely to get married. She's the last married, the first divorced. We have, what, 2/3 of our children being raised by working class and impoverished single black female-led households. The destruction of a nation begins in the home of its families. If we want to save black people, we have to save the black family. And in order to do that, black men have to commit themselves to black women.
So when you talk about not getting your respect, so if that's the case, you're saying President Barack Obama didn't get your respect because his dad married a white woman?
Oh, not at all.
Would Harry Belafonte?
Not at all. I want to be very clear about something. As Pan-Africanists, the product of an interracial union is an African. I have heroes who are biracial. Some of the grandfathers of Pan-Africanism were of mixed racial ancestry. You don't blame a child for how they got here.
But I'm asking you this here. Harry Belafonte has a white wife. No respect for him?
It would be very, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter your social status.
So no. I didn't say social status. I'm talking about the one who put the work in.
Right, but you put him out.
No. I'm asking you. So Harry Belafonte.
Yes, sir.
Sidney Poitier. Julian Bond. Vernon Jordan.
And you're naming all them to say what?
No, these are all African American men who have
done some good things.
No, who married white women. But you said any black man who marries a white woman will not get your respect.
Can I respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
And what I'm telling you is this: I don't care who you name. I don't care how much work you did for black people. Your greatest commitment to black people is being committed to a black woman. It is still a contradiction. No matter how much you think you did for the struggle, if you really were concerned with black people, you would have committed yourself to a black woman. So it doesn't matter how successful they are. It doesn't matter how great you may claim them to be. At the end of the day, you didn't think enough about your own people to marry a woman who looks like you.
Frederick Douglass.
Yes, sir. An ancestor of mine.
So when you say ancestor, what does that mean?
Well, let me break it down.
Because, again, some have said you tried to claim that you are a descendant of Frederick Douglass.
Okay, so let's deal with that.
So hold on one second. Here's a statement from the family. Let me go ahead and read this, please. The family of Frederick Douglass has received numerous inquiries about Umar Johnson questioning his relationship to Frederick Douglass. There have also been questions about his legitimacy of his PhD and the handling of the donations he's received for his school that he is promoting. We can tell you with 100% certainty that he is not a descendant of Frederick Douglass. With that being said, Mr. Johnson is very careful not to bill himself as a descendant, but he doesn't correct people when they refer to him in this way. He calls himself a blood relative, which is a nebulous reference designed to make people think he is a descendant. We have researched his explanation of being a blood relative to the great abolitionist. Some of the information he provides is accurate, but an extremely important piece of his explanation with regards to a documented relative of Frederick Douglass is false. The information he recites correctly is from the public record, so his knowledge of our family ancestry is far from definitive proof.
Two things there. One, he's not a descendant of Frederick Douglass, okay? I would concur with that, all right? But then two, you also heard that some of the things he says is correct. So the question becomes, he's either related or he's not, okay?
So are you related?
I'm about to answer your question,
okay.
If you allow me to do that. I am a blood relative of Frederick Douglass. My name is on the family tree. We have a family reunion every 2 years. What they're talking about, and I want to make sure you're clear, they're talking about whether or not I come through the loin of Frederick Douglass, which I do not, nor have I ever claimed, okay? I have more videos on YouTube than any other scholar. I speak around the world more than any other scholar. Show me where I've ever said I was a descendant. I've only claimed one thing, kinsman. How am I kinsman? If you ever read any of the autobiographies of Frederick Douglass, he talks about growing up on Tuckahoe Creek with Cousin Stephen. Cousin Stephen is Stephen Bailey, Dr. Umar Johnson's 4 times great-grandfather, whose grave I just visited last week. I go every year. Okay, that's my 4 times great-grandfather. He married my 4 times great-grandmother, Caroline Wilson Bailey. From that union came my 3 times great-grandfather, George Washington Bailey, the first black public school teacher on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. He married Grandmom Annie. They had Grandmom Caroline. Okay, she had Grandma Vivian. Grandma Vivian married a Spanish-speaking Cuban immigrant, Grandpop Cicero. They had Grandmom Ida, who's still alive, who married James Johnson, who had my father Jamal, who married my mama Barbara, and from that union I was born. I am a blood of Bailey. I am not married in. What they're talking about is strictly descendancy, something I've never claimed. Am I a kin? Do I directly come from the loin of the first cousin and potentially half-brother of Frederick Douglass? And the reason I say potentially, the slave master who owned our family, a white man named Aaron Anthony, raped Frederick's mother and raped Stephen's mother, my ancestor. And there's significant evidence to suggest that. Some people could still argue, though, that they were not brothers because it's not conclusive. Fine, throw that out. I'm still a kinsman because I come through the blood of his first cousin.
You talked about, again, respect. Do you respect?
I don't talk about respect. I get tremendous respect from my people.
I'm not talking about that. Do you respect Frederick Douglass?
Yes.
But he had a white wife.
He did.
So that's what I'm sure.
I'm gonna clarify.
Why is that an issue? Why is that? If you put in the work and you have the history, who cares who you marry?
I already answered that question, and I told you I don't care how much work you put in. If you don't commit yourself to a black woman, ultimately you wasn't totally committed to the struggle.
Even Frederick Douglass.
Even Frederick Douglass has to be criticized, as I did on the Breakfast Club. Now it has to be put in context. He didn't marry the white woman until he was an old man. After his wife Anna Murray Douglass of 50 years, a blue-black chocolate woman through whom all my cousins were born. He was an old man when he did it, but nonetheless he did it. And yes, he has to be criticized on that because a black man needs to be with a black woman, and it is a contradiction. I don't care how much work you think you've done for black folks to not commit yourself to a black woman.
Hold tight 1 second. I got more questions when we come back.
I would argue the reason black men marry white women is because they wish they were white themselves, and having the white man's prize, his queen, is a psychological symbol to myself that I am equal to him.
We're back with Dr. Umar Johnson. In that particular statement, the family also addressed this here. You talked about taking over the buildings or the land of a black school that was shut down.
Yes, sir. St. Paul's College.
And you were raising money for it. First of all, how much money has been raised, and what's the status of that project?
Well, St. Paul's has been sold. Approximately 3 to 5 months ago, I was told by the auction company in charge of the sale that it was been sold to a developer.
So how much money was raised? What people gave? All people gave. How much was raised, and what's the status of that?
$700,000, and the status is we're still looking for a school, and the status is my start date for FDMG will be 8/21/18. or if at all, it may be delayed to 8/21/19, which is the anniversary of the Nat Turner War.
We say looking for a school. Why not start a charter school? I mean, you can start a school.
Because charter schools are owned by the state, and I'm a Pan-Africanist. I believe what is to be done for black people must be done by black people. Why do I want a charter school?
So you want a private school?
Exactly. Independent school.
Lauren.
So the question of interracial marriage,
Yes,
I mean,
ma'am.
come on, man. You're too smart for this. We got 43.
I'm too smart for what?
We got 43 million black people in this country.
And that
we got
means
over
what?
190 million white people. You're going to sit here and say that if
Yeah, you
a
got
black
half the
person,
black
a white
women.
person get married, a black person, a white person get married, one can't understand the other person's struggle. You've seen
It's not about
Tim Wise, right?
individualism.
You've seen
It's
Reverend
about
Wallace. You've
systematic
seen white people who
empowerment.
understand racism very well.
That doesn't mean they're going to do anything about it.
The other thing that is obviously true is they understand racism when you see things like the murder of Medgar Evers, like the murder of Martin Luther King. They understand racism.
And what did they do about it?
They understand us gaining just fine, and that's why murder happened.
Based on
right?
what?
So the idea that somehow a white person can't understand our struggle,
I
no
couldn't
way.
care less what they understand. I'm
No
asking
way.
you, what have they done systematically
He already
to
told you
improve
that.
the opportunities
He
of white
already
folks?
told you
He
that.
did not tell me that.
Oh, yes, you did tell
He
you
did not
that.
tell me that.
You're going to tell me that guys like Tim Wise and Reverend Wallace don't understand
What about
race in
Tim
America?
Wise?
They don't understand race
He
in America?
articulates
They don't
racism,
So
but what has he done to
There are no white
systematically
people that understand race in
eliminate it?
America.
There's not
no
a white
people.
person
There's
in
no white
America.
people
One
understand
second.
race in America.
One second.
There's not a white person.
Them going to Eugene.
There's not a white person in America who has ever worked to systematically eliminate the white privilege that they benefit from vis-a-vis your oppression.
You're a liar.
You know,
Eugene,
190 million people in America.
Eugene.
We're not going to go there. We're not. I haven't.
Called me a liar, and you're a coon.
Well, it's a fact that
Watch
you're
how
lying.
you talk
It's
to
a
me,
fact
or
that
watch
you're
how I
lying.
talk
It's
to
a
you.
fact that you're
I
lying.
understand you.
Everybody, 1 second. Several things I don't allow. I don't allow the N-word. I don't allow cool. We can talk to one another and disagree, but I do not use racial epithets against
And
black
that's
people.
fine, but he called me a liar.
No.
So the language needs to be watched on both
Racial
sides.
epithets will not be used on this show
And that's fine.
by anybody.
But how we talk to each other needs
You
to
can
be
say
up.
whatever you want, but no racial epithets will be used on this show about black people to black people. Eugene, your question.
So, from your paradigm, from your perspective, Civil Rights Act isn't an act of white folk stepping up on behalf of black folk. Current criminal justice reform legislation moving isn't a current act of white folk stepping on behalf of black folk. Folk that funded the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s isn't an act of white folks stepping up on behalf of black folk. I'm sorry, as an American, because I define myself as an American, an African American.
I'm sure you do.
I live in a country that moves forward together. And I say that as a Republican. We move forward together. Yes, we have individual struggle. Yes, we have struggles.
I'm not talking
yes, we
about
have.
you.
Yes, no. Yes, we have.
talking about systematic
We have
bias
systematic.
and disproportionality.
One second.
We have-
Finish it.
Yeah.
Finish it. 15 seconds. Then you answer.
We have systematic struggles, and together as a country, moving forward to defeat those struggles.
Really? So, based on what you said, I want you to give me examples of white folk, not individuals, but systematically. Excuse me.
Why can't they be
Excuse me.
individuals?
One second.
I know you can't wait to
1 second
defend them,
answer.
but let me
1
finish.
second answer.
Can I finish?
Go.
Okay, I'm going. Okay? You cannot name anything systematically done ever in this country by white people to equal the playing field for black folks.
The Civil Rights Act, Congress literally sits behind us. The Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act.
Are you
Both
aware?
of them.
Are you aware?
Hey, can I?
Both of them.
White people are proud of you, son.
Scott Bolden.
Real quick. I think the terminology and the narrative being used is a little misleading, not from you, but from this dialogue right here.
Okay.
It's one thing to sympathize with the struggle. It's another one to empathize with the struggle. Very different. When you talk about marriage being a political choice, and that one of the arguments that you made that I tend to agree with is that if you don't marry a black woman, then she can never support and comfort and value your day-to-day struggle as a black man. That being said, I do think that the level of the rhetoric that you use in regard to your Pan-Africanism is difficult for many of us, quote, in the mainstream to get our arms around. But this issue about black men and white women in the civil rights struggle is not a new discussion. My mother was a civil rights activist in Chicago. and she would often complain privately that, one, you can't sleep black, you can't sleep white and talk black, if you will. And that's always been in the American struggle, African-American struggle with ourselves. The other thing is that we struggle with our own psychology about self-love and otherwise. And if we get our arms around that, that does make sense.
But you would have to say that you know 190 million people.
But you're being too...
One second.
You would have to claim that.
Individuals don't matter.
You'd have to claim
No,
that.
go ahead and respond. Go ahead.
And I agree with my brother's
Scott.
comments. Brother Scott. He brought up the Civil Rights Bill. But what he did not talk about in relation to the Civil Rights Bill is there were two words included in that bill that ultimately served to take away from black people what that bill was intended to deliver. They added gender and they added sexual orientation. And as a result of that, white women and homosexuals have been able to strip black America from the intended gains of the Civil Rights Act. So there was still racism in that bill if you will study that history.
So, Umar, your question was, has anyone black ever systematically done, has anyone white ever systematically done anything?
Systematically. White America.
So LBJ would be the answer for that, because that's the government.
No, I don't think you
That's a systematic move.
No, you didn't hear the question. No, you did not. No, you didn't. You're so quick to defend white folks that you're not listening.
No, I'm not trying to defend white folks.
I only have 45 seconds, so restate the question and give an answer.
Okay.
I got 45 seconds.
Let's get an answer.
The question was, what has white America done?
Right.
Not individuals. Systematically
Not
cannot.
individuals.
You
Why
won't
not
even let me
individuals?
finish.
Yeah, because
You're that in love with white folks, you won't even let me finish.
Point on everything.
Finish literally
3 times.
20 seconds.
There
is no bigger system than
20 seconds, I'll finish.
The
And in 20 seconds, I would say that the panel that you have here, who are extremely intelligent, do not represent the everyday black man and woman struggles, and then because of that, they can articulate.
And you represent 43 million people in this country? I don't think so.
You're watching The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the God. We are The Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building.
That's right.
Dr. Umar Johnson.
Peace
My
and
brother,
love.
peace.
Peace and love, family. All is well. Glad to be back.
Now let's get right to it, man. In
Yes,
light of
sir.
everything that's going on, what are the solutions? I think we've discussed the problem so much. What are the solutions?
All right. Before I state the solution, I would have to challenge you on that. Because although we talk about the problems a lot of people don't understand how the problem operates.
Gotcha.
Let me give you an example. Take miseducation.
Okay.
People know the children aren't learning. They know black boys are not graduating. They know special ed is an issue. They know ADHD is a problem. But they don't know how this operates. They don't understand how the child goes from the classroom into the special education system.
Okay.
So they have to be taught how it operates. You follow? So we understand that police genocide is a problem in the black community. We understand that structural inequality, disproportionality, i.e. racism, is a problem. But do we understand how racism operates? So I think that once you understand how the problem operates and manifests itself, you're now in a position to solve it. Someone comes to me for therapy. Before I do any therapy, what I do, a clinical history. Is there depression in your family? Have you been depressed before? Have you ever contemplated suicide? So I have to understand your background and how you've been living your life in order to solve your current everyday problems. So now, coming to the present, what we're seeing going on around the country. Let's be honest. Africans were brought to America to serve. We're no longer necessary for the American economic order to operate. They don't need us to function. That explains the purging. That explains the ethnic cleansing.
Even with all these Negroes making money?
Well, remember now, when you look at the black folks who are rich, they are a small percentage of the general body politic of the community. You understand? 85% of black folks are struggling. Half of our children grow up in poverty. Most of our single-parent black mothers are poor, even with a burgeoning rate of black women earning their college degrees. So simply put, black America is suffering despite the television projection of success. Yes, we are more educated than ever before. We have the bachelors, we have the masters, we have the doctorates. But that education has not taken place alongside an increase in wealth acquisition. We're smarter, but we still don't own anything.
But we know we're poor. We know some of us are not well educated. We know some of us have a lot of problems due to where we're growing up in our environment.
Yes.
But besides all of that, we got a bigger problem with racism. The way that other people look at us.
I agree.
You know what I mean? But I'm not saying it's right, but the way we look at ourselves is bad too.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because if I'm walking down the street and I see some brothers with some hoods on, it makes me think twice.
Right.
So if it makes me think twice, I know it's going to make somebody else think twice, but it doesn't give us doesn't give them the right to put a.
But that's based off your experiences, though.
But it is based off my
yeah.
experience.
It's also based off conditioning. The conditioning is critical. Media is critical to the social agenda of any country. You understand? You take Adolf Hitler. Before he did what he did in Germany, he conducted a media campaign that sought to destroy the image of the European Jew in the German mind before the physical Holocaust began. Same thing in America. Before you begin taking the black life, you must kill the image of the black life. So when you look at gangster rap, which plays a hand in it, okay, when you look at the way in which we're portrayed in movies, when you look at the way in which we're portrayed on radio, popular media, magazines, it is in a very negative way, as if to say these people, the world would be better off without these people.
That's why
so
they
once
give people criminal records when they kill them.
Exactly. In other words, it's not so bad that he died because he went to jail anyway. So you have to kill the image before you kill the person. Why? Because people will take up for people who are unjustly treated. But if you can convince the world that we will be better off without these people by killing their image, then when the physical carnage begins, no one will care.
How do we change that, though? How do we change the way that America looks at African Americans, and how do we change the fact that these racist individuals, racist police officers, stop pulling out the gun? See, I think you have to penalize them. You know, it's kind of like a kid. You know, your kid does something bad and you say, okay, it's okay, he's going to continue to do it. But if you bust his ass, next time he's thinking about doing it, he's going to be like, well, you know what, my pops is going to bust my ass. I feel like the police officers that kill African Americans, just kill people in general, they don't get penalized for it.
I agree with it. You're absolutely correct. For example, behavioral psychology, 2 basic laws is what? All behavior is a function of the context in which it takes place. The American racial hierarchy is a function of the context. And then it's a function of the consequences. You follow? So in other words, behavior never stands still. Whether it's you, whether it's a child, whether it's the country, whether it's the police, behavior is always getting worse or it's always getting better. So when Zimmerman wasn't punished for Trayvon, that automatically created a context for it to happen again. Do you understand? Walter Scott, Tamir Rice, it creates a context. So the next police officer says, well, wait a minute, I can be a little bit more trigger happy because the last 5 black men and women, Sandra Bland, who were murdered by police, were not held accountable. So when you do nothing about misbehavior, then you're actually supporting its repeat.
Now, what do protests do? Because people protest and they say, you know, and I love the unity. And I love the unity of African American people. I think it has to be more unified when it's not just a brother dying. But I feel like sometimes the protest, what is it getting accomplished?
Okay.
You know? And the reason I ask that is because, you know, you protest, you shut down a highway, there's an ambulance that's trying to get somebody to a hospital, that person dies in the ambulance. You know, I'm stuck in traffic, I can't pick up my kid at 5 p.m. So what is the protest actually doing? Is it going to make the cop look at us any better? Like, what can we do besides, I think, the protest? I don't know if the protests really work.
Right. Well, first of all, we got to keep in mind that the black person is normally dead before the ambulance shows up to get him in the first place. True. So let's be clear on that. But here's the thing, Envy. Protest is the first stage of any political economic struggle. Right. Protest is your marketing program to let the world know what I stand for, what's happening to me, and what I want. Protest allows you to control the public narrative about your struggle. Without the protest, the world doesn't know why you're doing what you're doing. So protest is important because it is your way to put out your message. Gotcha. So you can't do nothing without it. The problem with black people is there's nothing after the protest. Right. Do you understand? The protest becomes the goal instead of the means to the end.
That's what I keep asking. What is the solution? What's the next action? Like we saw.
Well, let me tell you what has to happen now. Okay. Because now we're in a state of crisis for black America. Okay. 3 things black America has failed to do, which is going to keep this carnage machine in place, this police genocide. Number 1, we have failed to publicly criticize and hold accountable the executive branch of the United States government, i.e. President Barack Obama. Despite all the killings, despite all the murders, despite an unemployment rate and a dropout rate that is greater under a black president than it was under the 2 previous Republican presidents, black people have remained silent. Obama has ignored black folk. In fact, we are the only so-called minority population in the country for which he has done nothing nor has spoken significantly for our issues. Compare us to LBGT. They got 3 laws under Obama, 3
That is unprecedented. How many laws did black people get under Obama to protect us from police genocide, or even to improve the schools or to reduce incarceration?
Wow.
0. Okay, they got a Supreme Court justice. Latinos got a Supreme Court justice. LBGT got a Supreme Court justice. President Obama had the opportunity to appoint the first African-American female Supreme Court justice, and he chose not to act. It's not all his fault, though. We have created a context where the president can ignore black people and get away with it because we told the entire world when he was elected that all he had to do was just be black, and we were fine. Remember?
Yeah, we didn't.
He doesn't have to do anything but be black. That is the worst thing you can say as a marginalized, oppressed group in such a racist country as this, as to tell the world that the president, the executive branch of the United States government, does not have to be accountable for you.
That's for any head of state, though. Any head of state we elect, we need to push and make sure things happen.
But Obama is the first president out of 44, the first one from George Washington up, that has not have to deal with any sort of public criticism from black people. And if he leaves office without any, here's the problem. If we let Obama leave office without any condemnation from the black community, by virtue, you cannot hold Hillary or Trump accountable for what they do not do for black people, because you have now created a precedent where a president can come in for 8 years, ignore you, even with police genocide, and not receive any criticism.
Why do people make excuses? You know, and I was always mad. I was upset about this because I felt like he was our president. You know, and I felt like when certain things happen, I felt like he should be on the front lines because he's dealt and seen, and I'm sure he's been pulled over before. I'm sure he's been racially profiled before. So it kind of bothers me when I see a lot of these individuals get shot and killed, and you don't really hear much from them.
Exactly.
Even to the thing with, you know, when he flew back to go to the funerals and speak to the officers in Dallas, I thought that was great. But then I also thought, well, what about Baton Rouge?
Exactly.
What about Minnesota?
Exactly.
What about Ferguson?
He's not going to do that because President Obama understands something that most blacks in America do not understand. The first business of America is racism. Let's be clear about something. Most white people in America, okay, are also suffering economically, right? So if I'm white in a country based on white privilege, what is my claim to fame if I don't have a decent education, don't have a good job? For many white people in this country, their only claim to fame is the fact that I can say I exercise privilege vis-a-vis black people. Obama understands that. So America is held together by the fact that the poor white man understands that he still exercises a privilege that the rich black man does not.
And that's what Donald Trump is reminding them. Donald Trump's reminding all the poor
Donald
white
Trump
people.
changed the game, and let me tell you why. The United States power structure underestimated the impact of an unapologetically honest fool over the American electorate. Do you understand? In other words, Trump is saying to white folks what white folks feel.
Poor white folks, too.
Yes, poor white folks. So you got a rich, wealthy white man appealing to poor white folks. You've never had that. But it's working because he is unapologetic. He's ignorant. He's a fool. But he's honest. And white folk can respect and identify with a white male who's willing to be honest. In other words, Donald Trump intentionally made sure he was the polar opposite of Barack Obama. Look at Obama. You ask Obama a question, you don't get an answer. You never get a straight answer from Obama. It's always what we got to see. Let's see what the Americans think. Now, go back to George Bush. George Bush told you what he felt. He was another idiot, but he was honest. Trump is honest. The reason white folks are not rallying behind Hillary the way that the power structure wants them to is because Hillary is the same old thing. She's Clinton all over again. She's Obama all over again.
Correct.
She's a Bilderberg. She's politically correct. Her whole message is scripted. Trump's is not. So the issue now is how do we engineer an election where Hillary wins? Because right now, Trump is carrying the momentum. See, remember now, people don't choose the president anyway. But you want the people to choose the person you wanted. So the illusion of democracy continues to prevail. America is not a democracy. America is a republic. That's why when people pledge the flag, and I hope there's no black boys pledging the flag, but when people pledge the flag, they pledge the flag to the republic. The word democracy is not in the pledge. The word democracy is not in the preamble. The word democracy is not in the Constitution. The word democracy is not in any of the 50-state constitutions. So why is America called a democracy when it's really a republic? Because it is the illusion of inclusion, a belief that the people actually control its leaders when it does not.
So with that said, right,
for as much as we know that America has a history of racism, institutionalized racism, systemic racism, why did Barack Obama become president? Why did they allow Barack
Excellent
to become
question.
president?
Okay, every president that is elected is given a domestic mandate and an international mandate. There's something they need you to do domestically. There's something they need you to do internationally. For President Obama, his international mandate was to reopen Africa's resources to Western exploitation.
Right.
George Bush destroyed the economic conversation between America and Africa. And as you know, Africa is the richest continent on the face of the earth. No country can survive without it. If you have a cell phone, laptop, television, car, airplane, it requires a substance, a material called coltan. The Congo is the #1 producer of coltan on the globe. No Congo, no cell phones. So America needs Africa. Bush destroyed the relationship, though, with the African Union. With Obama's father being Kenyan and his mother being white, you understand? He was the perfect person to put in the White House to reopen up that relationship with Africa, which he has done. Okay? And through AFRICOM, which is African Command, President Obama has successfully recolonized Africa in the name of Western financial interest at a rate we haven't seen since Africa was under colonialism. So he succeeded internationally. That was the international mandate. Get the money back from Africa, the gold, the diamonds, the oil, the coltan, get it back. He got it.
Some people will say that Barack did,
What's the domestic mandate?
The domestic mandate. The reason President Obama was made president domestically is to brainwash and manipulate Black America long enough so the American power structure could take every civil right that our ancestors fought for and give it to every other minority group. So by the time Obama leaves office, all of our rights will have taken from the other minority groups, and we will be back in the 1960s Jim Crow style.
So how does that work? Because I keep looking at the Constitution like, did they remix it for black people?
It doesn't apply to you anyway.
Yeah.
Remember now, when remember the 1865, you get the 13th Amendment. You're free. Okay? 1867, you get the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. But the 1866, but the 14th Amendment isn't ratified till 1868. You know why? Because you need 2/3 of the states to ratify an amendment. They said we're not giving black folks equal protection under the law. So what were you between 65, emancipation, and 68, ratification of the 14th Amendment? You were simply a resident, not a citizen. Black people in America today are still residents, not citizens. And we people have freedom. Black people have liberty. Freedom is the ability to make decisions without external control. Liberty is the ability to make decisions because an external control gave you the privilege. Do you see the difference? One of them, you got people doing what they want to do. The other, you can do what you want to do within these constraints because we still own you. That's exactly why Abraham Lincoln emancipated the slaves. Emancipation simply means to let go from bondage. It also means a transference of ownership from the individual to the state. They never eliminated slavery. They just transformed it.
Now, people would say that Barack Obama did Obamacare, which helped a lot of African Americans get health care. They would say that he did that for African Americans. They would also say that he opened up the White House to a younger audience.
That's your shirt, by the way, Envy. My college tour.
Thank you, appreciate it. They said that, that there are stuff that he does for the African American community. They say his hands are tied behind his back. There's no support in Congress. They said he's opened up the White House to musicians, artists, to kids that normally wouldn't get a chance to see the White House, wouldn't get a chance to be in the White House, wouldn't get a chance to learn in the White House. They said he's done a lot for youth. You know? Do you agree? Or
I totally disagree. What has Obama to change the intentional exploitation of black children in special education? What has Obama done to increase the rate of African American teachers and principals? What has Obama done to modernize the schools in predominantly African American school districts? What has Obama done to reduce the suspension and exposure rate of black children? I don't care how many Negroes are dancing in the White House, singing in the White House, and cooning in the White House. What have you done of substance systematically to improve the quality of life for black folk as you have done to improve the quality of life for Latinos, immigrants, and LGBTs?
Have you ever seen a good president in your lifetime?
No, you can never do that because America is based off racism. It was founded on racism, which is ironic because when you listen to CNN, and I was watching D.L. Hughley with the little piece that he had, they always talk about playing the race card. You understand? That is the most misleading concept I've ever heard of, playing the race card. When we was brought up here in slavery, okay, was that playing a race card or was that racist? Do you understand? America is racism.
From slavery to
America
segregation,
is
Jim
racism.
Crow.
When Birth of a Nation came out, the first major motion picture, which was a story about how letting black folks out of slavery would simply destroy the social context of America, guess where it was played? In the White House. The president had a private viewing of Birth of a Nation.
Right. Oh, did Nate Parker Nat Turner movie?
No. He sarcastically named his Nat Turner movie after the original Birth of a Nation to take hit at it.
Got you.
Yes.
But a lot of people,
And we was at Nat Turner Land 2 days ago with the college tour.
A lot of people say that, that's not necessarily true. That they say that HBCUs are not warranted now, that they should be, historically black colleges are not needed. They say, the NAACP is not needed.
And where did that argument come from, Envy? The argument came from since you got a president in the White House.
Said the other day. I wanted your opinion on what you felt about HBCUs and the NAACP because she feels like it's not necessarily warranted, that it should be open to everybody. And that
Let me say this. As long as something is being done special to the black man and woman, something must be done specifically for the black man and woman to counteract that. So, for example, earlier when you said the employment and things like that, there are black folks who benefited from that envy. But in order to help us, you have to do something specifically for us because our history is specific. We're the only people in this country who are not of white skin who cannot be deported, which is the central challenge of the black predicament. What did W.E.B. Du Bois say? He said the #1 problem of the 21st century will be the color line. I would take it a step further. The #1 problem of the 21st century in America is what do we do with 40 million black folks who we do not want and cannot deport? This is why we are kept from realizing our true gifts and talents because you cannot be sent back to Africa. Slavery psychologically destroyed your connection to your mother continent. For example, Chinese can be sent back to China. Latinos can be sent back to Cuba, Puerto Rico, or points beyond. Okay? An East Indian can be sent back to India. Okay? An Arab can be sent back to whatever Arabian nation from which they come. Where do you send African Americans back to?
Because I'll be lost in Africa.
Because your psychological connection was destroyed. You understand? So what do you do with these people?
Chick-fil-A in Africa, bro.
Cut it out. What do you do with these people who you do not want and cannot deport? You must create a system of genocide from within that seeks to remove them. That's why mass incarceration will never change. This is why people keep saying they spend millions of dollars on prison. It costs less to send them to school. So why are you spending this money on jail instead of sending them to school? Because this ain't about money. This is about an America that is free from black people. Police extermination feeds that. Abortion, which is the #1 killer. Most people don't understand this. More black babies are murdered in the stomach than they are on the street corner. And why? Because a black woman growing up in poverty with already a couple of children, seeing how hard it is to make ends meet, is probably going to think about potentially terminating that pregnancy. It's not a moral issue. It's a political, economic, white supremacist issue. Why bring another life in this world so they can only be murdered by the police like Trayvon?
Or just struggle in the hood.
Or just struggling in the hood.
Do you think the issue with cops is a black-white thing or a police?
Without question.
Or police abusing power thing?
It's both. Remember, when slavery ends in 1865, there are no national incarceration systems. Most states didn't even have a fully functioning prison system. Guess when they created the prison system? In 1865. That's when they gave you the first statewide prison systems. Why? Because we got 4 million black folks we just left out of slavery. They don't have jobs. We're not going to give them any, so that means they got to do what to eat, Envy? Rob and steal. So we're going to create vagrancy laws. If I catch you stealing anything, guess what? That's a felony. I'm going to put you on the chain gang, and you're going to be on the chain gang for 10 years for stealing a lollipop. This is what they did. You could go to jail for not having a job. You could go to jail for being homeless. They made simple, petty offenses major felonies. So that from the beginning of so-called emancipation, the prison system existed for one reason: to remove black men from the society. The jail is a slave ship that sits on land instead of water. But here's the point I need y'all to get. The reason we're struggling so much as a people is because we're not given systematic access to wealth. Let me give an example. Chinese, Arab, East Indian, they come to America. They can walk into any bank and get a loan. Not all of them, but many of them. In fact, some of them don't even have to get a loan from Wells Fargo, Chase Manhattan, or Bank of America. And I'm just using them to make the point. They show up in America with a long line of credit from their native country. They come into the ghetto, open up 10 stores, 5 supermarkets, 3 hotels. Black folks still struggling. And then people look at us and say, you know why you're struggling? Because you're lazy. The Chinese guy over here been here 5 years. The East Indian been here 10 years. The Arab only been here 8 years. He got 5 gas stations. What's your excuse? Let me tell you what our excuse is. We are systematically denied access to wealth. Do you understand? So we can't build that hospital they built. We can open up 10 supermarkets. I can't get 10 gas stations in 3 weeks because you're going to routinely deny me access to wealth. You'll give me a small business loan. And here's the kicker. Let me ask you a question. Why would they give you a loan for student loan for college? They'll give you a car loan for the car. They'll give you a loan for your house. So you can get a mortgage loan, you can get a student loan, you can get a car loan. But you can't get a business loan. Wait a minute now. The education is going to cost me $100 grand. The car is going to be about 70 grand. The house is going to be $250,000. Why do you approve that, but you don't approve the business loan, which is probably for half the amount? Because if I finance your empowerment, that disrupts my system of extermination and genocide. You cannot kill a people who you are financially empowering. So we are kept without access to wealth. That's why the hood is full of mom and pop stores. That's why the hood is full of struggling businesses, because America has a policy where you do not empower black people for their own benefit. Any other minority? Yes. Why? Because if they get out of hand, they can be sent home. The black man cannot be sent home. Slavery is older than America. America was born on July 4th, 1776. Slavery in the colonies began on August the 20th, 1619.
Now, with that said, how could an economic boycott work? We were talking about this morning.
I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, we boycott, where do we go? We don't have black-owned businesses in shop.
Listen, an economic boycott would be a very, very powerful agenda move. I don't think it's going to work because we don't have that type of commitment to each other. Listen, when Dr. King led the Montgomery bus boycott, 381 days, not a single black person rode the bus. They said the elders were walking on their bare feet because they couldn't afford to buy new shoes. Could you imagine if you went out here and told these Negroes in New York that you're going to boycott public transportation? Well, I go back to Philly and tell the brothers and sisters of Philly we want to boycott public transportation. They would look at you like you're crazy. Yes!
I think they would if we had a leader. See, I think with us, who is the leader? Who do we look up to?
Church. And why is church leadership? But Envy, here's the question. I agree with you. But sarcastically, why is church leadership so popular in the black community? Because church leaders are the only leaders who don't actually do anything except show up and give money. They sell hope, not substance. You're not going to follow. If Dr. King was in America today, I do not think Dr. King could achieve half of what he achieved 50 years ago because you're dealing with a new Negro who has no obligation to the collective, no interest in the progress of his people, and is intentionally egotistical and individualistic about his pursuits. We don't care about racism until it knocks on our front door.
I agree with you on that, and I'm going to tell you why. I feel like back when Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and those guys was fighting, black people really had nothing.
We all
Zero.
understood
yes,
that we were oppressed.
Now some of us got things, and it's like,
and it confuses the political. Look, if I'm a politically uneducated African American, not illiterate, just politically uneducated, I got Charlemagne, Envy, and Umar. They doing all right. Over here, I got some brothers and sisters struggling. I'm confused because I'm seeing some black folks who struggling. I'm seeing some who all right. So maybe it ain't racism.
Yeah.
Maybe it is us. And then when America prop up certain bourgeoisie Negroes to defend the system and say, stop blaming the white man, it's you. You understand? You don't move. What do people do when they're confused? They stand still. Black America is at a standstill because they don't know if they should listen to the Sharptons and the Jessies who say racism does exist, but it's not that bad, or do they want to listen to Dr. Umar who says that until you overcome the racism, it's going to be difficult for black people to really live a life that a man and woman was put on earth to live. They're confused, Envy. And so what does America do? Who do they put on TV? They only put on TV and radio the leaders that they know are going to do nothing but echo the sentiment of the government. That's why, like, when you look at organizations like Black Lives Matter, and I take nothing away from Black Lives Matter, I do think that there's a role for protest and agitation. But if all you're going to do is protest and agitate, and you're not constructively building anything for the community, you understand? And you're absolutely at the end of the day of no benefit to people, because we don't just need alarmists running around chasing racism whenever it rears its ugly head.
Right.
We need you to acknowledge the racism and then turn around, come back to the community, and build something.
See, the problem is what you said is people need leadership. When I say leadership, they need to know what to do. You know, and the reason I say that is we can sit up here on the radio all day long, and what's the first thing Charlemagne said? What do we do? What can we do? See, if Martin Luther King said, we're not going to ride the bus.
Right.
Black people say, okay, we're not going to ride the bus.
That ain't true, but they wouldn't do it for long.
What?
You know, I know that. Remember when Sean Bell got killed?
Uh-huh.
I remember we all walked. This is when I was working with Wendy Williams. We all walked out of Wendy's show. Bunch of us. We all on 33rd Street. We holding hands. We blocking off the highways. As soon as those police pulled up and was like, all right, if y'all don't move in 5 seconds, we're going to start locking people up. I mean, no justice, no peace. They got to 5, and we start seeing they really locking people up. Everybody, literally. I got to get back to work, man. I can't afford to be in no jail.
And what are you pointing out? You're pointing out something that is at the nexus of the black struggle. If you do not break the law, you do not change the law.
Right.
Study history. History is made by those who have broken the law. Let us keep in mind, Martin Luther King Jr. was once a felon. Frederick Douglass was a felon. Harriet Tubman was a felon. They were wanted as fugitives of the law for exercising their conscience to do the right thing as opposed to obeying laws and regulations put in place to keep black people in their place. If you're not going to break the law, you will never change it. The problem with that is what, Charlemagne? A Negro with 3 master's degrees or a doctorate degree ain't